My name is Theresa Notare. Some of you may know me. For those who don't, I'm the Assistant Director of the Natural Family Planning Program of the Bishops' Conference NFP Ministry in Washington, D.C. Our office was founded in 1981 by Cardinal Cook after the Synod, the 1980 Synod on the Family, when he realized that something needed to be done in the United States to have a more proactive strategy to help the dioceses with their natural family planning ministry. And today, our topic, as you saw from your program, is on effective diocesan NFP ministry, what that looks like. And we're going to do this in a kind of an unusual way. We're going to do a little bit of an interview to understand what effective programs mean. It's often good to look at what did we learn from the past and how did we do the ministry in the beginning, what was weak, what was strong, and how we go forward. So in order to do that today, we have our two panelists. We have Diocesan NFP coordinators here. Alice Heinzen from the Diocese of La Crosse. She's been a natural family planning teacher for over 30 years, and for 25 years, the Diocesan NFP coordinator for, as I said, the Diocese of La Crosse. And the last 5 years, she's actually been upgraded to the Family Life Director, and she still has the NFP ministry under her as part of her ministry. And then we have Cindy Leonard from the Diocese of Phoenix, who has been a teacher for over 38 years, an NFP teacher, and as the diocesan NFP coordinator in the Diocese of Phoenix for 11 years. Currently, you should know in the United States, we have 197 dioceses, and more than half of them have what I would call an identifiable program. There's a bishop who has designated one person to be responsible for the NFP ministry. That person is often called the coordinator. But that person typically oversees a variety of other ministries as well. I have to say, right now, the common trend is for the Marriage and Family Life Director to have responsibility for natural family planning, as well as for pro-life activities, all that goes into marriage ministry. So, you know, that takes things in like marriage preparation programs, marriage enrichment programs, programs for troubled marriages, retrovi and things like that, continuing education for clergy. Sometimes they might even have youth ministry under their secretariat or curia office, as however they name it in their diocese. So they tend to wear many hats. Now, regarding natural family planning ministry, all the methods are pretty much represented well in the dioceses. We group them, of course, under those that are cervical mucus methods, and the two most popular are the Creighton model and the Billings model. In symptothermal, there are a number of programs that are available, including even diocesan homegrown programs. But I would say that the most popular in our surveys that we do annually, the most frequently cited is couple-to-couple league. And then we have, of course, in recent years, the symptohormonal method, notably provided by Marquette's Natural Family Planning Institute in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So those are the methods that are represented in the dioceses. And I would say that for those dioceses where there's a very, very loose to almost non-existent structure, we still have someone in the chancery who is supposed to know who the NFP teachers are, and we call them the contact, the diocesan contact person. And that person is supposed to disseminate information from the Bishops' Conference and other NFP providers to their local teachers, who, again, the teachers are pretty much exclusively volunteers. Some dioceses will give them a stipend for babysitting expenses or traveling expenses, or even just a modest thank you stipend, you know, and then others will not. So there's huge variety in the kind of support that we have for the teachers and also the kind of support that goes on in the dioceses. Now, just another word about our two coordinators today. We also have the example of the rural diocese. La Crosse is, Wisconsin, and the part that Alice is in is very far north. It's a rather cold climate. Snow happens well into April, I suppose. And there's a lot of farmland. And Cindy, of course, is in a desert in Phoenix, Arizona, in an urban setting. So we also have the contrast of those two settings. And now, in terms of the actual content, it's important to know that the reason why the Catholic Church is in the NFP business is because we do view it as a ministry, and it is part of the Church's comprehensive ministry to the married in the Church. And that's why the bishops and Cardinal Cook understood this well. The bishops have a responsibility to help couples live God's design for married love. And we know, as what we've been hearing in all of these talks at this conference and what you know in your work, is that our world is not providing anything ethical for couples to use to live out God's design for married love. So the Church has an obligation in this ministry. Now, as I said, we have learned lessons in terms of our diocesan ministry, and I think we should just dive right into it. So let me ask Alice and Cindy, what was it like when you first started your NFP ministry back in the day?
Thanks, Theresa. Again, Alice is my name, La Crosse, Wisconsin, where we have more cows than we have people. So when we talk about this, there are a couple of things that I want to mention. I started as in NFP in the late 1980s and took over as the coordinator in the mid-1990s. And at that time, I have to say that the focus of any natural family planning presentations made to our clergy, to our engaged couples, to whoever would listen to us, focused on the factual science. We were really bent on making sure that people understood that natural methods were very effective in preventing pregnancies. We talked some about the health benefits and the fact that there was no side effects to worry about when you used a natural method. Though it was never our intent, what we did is we made contraceptive methods the gold standard by which we compared everything. And natural methods at that time, our greatest focus was on pregnancy prevention. So we had to work really hard to convince couples that NFP was just as effective as a contraceptive method. And we rarely intentionally talked about natural methods back in the late 80s and the early 90s as a method that would also assist couples in achieving pregnancy.
That's right, Alice. The same was happening in Phoenix. Most of the promotion back then was aimed to show just how NFP was just as good as birth control. Education then was reactive rather than proactive. We had to show that NFP was different from the old calendar rhythm that these couples' parents had used, but that was just as effective as the pill. It was assumed by us that most people wanted to avoid pregnancy. So we talked mostly about effectiveness for avoiding pregnancy. And the tendency was also to provide education in secular references too, not religious. We really didn't mention the church unless someone brought it up. We kind of backpedaled that whole part. We said that NFP wasn't against Catholic Church teaching, and we kind of left it at that. We taught natural family planning as a method rather than a lifestyle or a way to live that achieves holiness.
Beyond that, the theological rationale supporting natural methods was rarely included for this reason. Teachers were very afraid that if they brought God into this picture, into the secular comparison, that would discourage couples from using natural family planning. So we were very timid about our theological underpinnings back in before the year 2000. We only talked about it when we felt necessary to do so, but then we were very soft in our approach. Now, one thing to remember before you go, you guys, I can't believe you were like that back then. Theology of the body really didn't come into the forefront and begin to sunrise until about the year 2000.
Can I interrupt as well? And in some other dioceses, what often they would do, they would have, say if they gave the classes one class a month for 3 months, well, the third class might be the, quote, church teaching class. So they really segregated church teaching in some dioceses. They didn't have a nice flow of integrating it.
I will mention, though, that our early teacher trainings were really quite excellent. We used to have like monthly in-services with a few very dedicated teachers. The theology was really deeply taught to our instructors, with much emphasis placed also on researching, knowing, and imparting all of the serious side effects of contraceptive methods and on their methods of action. All of the seminal research done by NFP developers, such as Billings, Retzer, Volman, Keefe, Oldeblatt, Hilgers, were very, very well taught to our instructors in those early days.
And so, of course, the next question is, what was the result? How did all of that work?
It didn't work. It was ineffective. It did not, what the approach we used back then never revealed the beauty of natural methods nor God's plan. Because our message focused on the rules and the facts before the good, natural family planning came across to so many couples as judgmental. How dare you tell us that we need to use that? It came across as not merciful at all. And because we had made contraception the gold standard, basically couples dismissed it because they're like, well, if you're just like contraception, why would we use you when it's so much more difficult? And we have to abstain? So it was very ineffective. Not only did we have a hard time finding traction with the couples, we also had a hard time finding traction with our priests and our clergy. Priests didn't trust NFP. Why? Well, first of all, the clergy didn't think that NFP methods would work for a couple of reasons. Number one, they doubted that men could actually have self-control to use a natural method. All right? They didn't think that they could. And we unintentionally helped them form that because we said that men were fertile all the time, and that fed into that thinking, all right? But the second thing is that they also doubted that women could consistently and accurately observe on a daily basis their signs of fertility, all right? Finally, NFP couples that they knew had large families. And because we had always emphasized the pregnancy prevention of this more than the entire lifestyle approach, we fell under our own sword.
So true. Well, the laity didn't find it interesting or valuable to learn about a family planning method that took so much time to learn and effort to implement. We also had a tough time convincing people it wasn't rhythm. And certainly the way of the effectiveness studies back then and still today conflate the rhythm method studies with all the natural approaches to natural family planning. That didn't help, because when they looked up those studies, it did not look like we were 98 to 99% effective. So many couples who did take the course would use natural family planning and have their family and then get sterilized. This was discovered, much to our horror, in the Diocese of Phoenix when we conducted a simple continuation survey about 25 years ago. It horrified the teaching community, and it really awakened us to the realization that we were doing something non-productive and perhaps possibly quite wrong. We teachers were quite vocal in asking the addition of a full theology piece in the natural family planning introduction. And this was developed 25 years ago and was a requirement for engaged couples up until 2010. We had 1 hour of church teaching, followed by 1 hour introduction for the science or methodology of natural family planning as an introduction for all engaged couples in our church. It was the first step in forming couples in an adequate anthropology prior to teaching the methodologies. And this memory of getting to this first step came back to me quite profoundly when I recently read about a recent Swedish study, recent report in the New York Post earlier this year. The Natural Cycles app, which made headlines last year when it became the first certified app in the world of its kind, well, it was hit with complaints after being blamed for 37 unwanted pregnancies. This was in Sweden, and these women, most of them went for abortions and complained about this app. The creators of the app claimed that the app is as effective as the pill and that the 37 unwanted pregnancies out of 668 women in the study were in line with the typical use and comparable to other types of contraception. So this just came right back to me for the study that we did 25 years ago in the Diocese of Phoenix. From what we learned back then in our little continuation study, we have to conclude that simply using NFP as a method does not change hearts or even behavior much of the time. It didn't in Phoenix 25 years ago, and it isn't likely to in Sweden today.
And so what have you learned in terms of then the programming and the kinds of changes that you would have to make?
We learned, and this was basically after the theology of the body started coming onto the marketplace around the year 2000, that we were starting at the wrong place. We were ineffective by starting with the rule and the facts, and that we needed to change it up. We needed to start with the Catholic theology about the personhood, love, marriage and family, and sexuality. That is much more effective in motivating couples to use a natural method. We learned that when people learn the why behind NFP before the what, they open their hearts and their minds to the what that God has planned for them. This meant that we had to change our educational approach to precede and link the method-specific information to God's plan for love and life. In doing so, we intentionally made the NFP method secondary to the theology and philosophy supporting its use. There was one important change that we made, and that is in the Diocese of La Crosse, Wisconsin, we began to present NFP as a skill set that allows couples to be faithful to the vow that they take on the day of their wedding to be open to life. All right, so they take the vow of faithfulness. Faithfulness has to have a skill set of communication. If you're going to be faithful, you need to do it. So we pair the vow of faithfulness with communication. All right, if you're going to be permanently married, you need a skill set of conflict resolution, right? So we pair it to there. If you're going to be open to life, you need a skill set of a natural method so that you can actually use that method to achieve or avoid a pregnancy. When we took it to that step and we did skill set, we stopped also using the idea that NFP was a miraculous fix that would make marriage perfect in every way. We stopped making inferences that natural family planning was easy to use and to learn. Rather, we equated it to any other worthy skill set that includes a learning curve. It requires attention, and it improves one's personal virtue to do what is right according to God's plan.
Well, I'd like to add to that. I was very new at that time, assisting in my office and working for the bishop who founded my office. And there was really this kind of constant artificial switching over from fertility educator to marriage minister, And there was this aversion a lot of the NFP leaders had for calling themselves a marriage minister. I think that lay leaders at the time in general, were trying to grapple with who are they in the dioceses assisting the bishops in any ministry at that point in time, but especially with natural family planning, because it had such a strong medical look to it, such a strong clinical look to it, that it was always kind of hard to keep bringing the two together. And as the founder of our office, Bishop McHugh used to say, James McHugh, he would say that the church has no business doing this except for our teachings, because you can't expect people in this very sensitive area of life to go forward with nothing. You have to give them something to help them live the truth. And so, Cindy, we'll hear from you now.
Next question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say, yes, what does the programming look like? Cindy, when you start with theology of the body and you do ground everything in God's plan for married love and life.
Well, we're going to start with a little bit with me, and then we'll hand it off to Cindy. So here's what it looks like now. Our intent is to meet the people where they are. And that means actually that in the Diocese of La Crosse, we created our own marriage preparation retreat day. And it has 4 sections. The first one's on covenant, the next one's on faithfulness, the next one's on permanence, and the last one is on openness to life. Each session is basically 2 hours in length, surrounded by prayer, and then the education and the exchange that we give them. In that, we start by asking couples simple questions, and I'm going to just go to the openness to life presentation. To get them on board, we ask them simple questions to find out where they are, all right? And then we move them from where they are to where we want to take them. So let me give you an example. One of the questions that we ask all of the couples, and they discuss this just with their beloved, is, do you want to be a master or a disaster at sexual love? Of course, they all say master, right? You know, I mean, who's going to come to a marriage retreat and say disaster? So, of course, they all say that. And when we say that to them, we say, okay, if that's truly what you want, then chastity is a practice that will help you master your sexuality. And then we talk about chastity. And what that does is it allows us to know where they are and then move them forward with the desire that they have. Because their idea about mastering their sexuality means something more that you would find elsewhere on the internet. But when we talk with them about chastity, you can just see them kind of go, oh, I get that. I have to control myself for her. She has to control herself for me. She has to be open and receptive. I have to be honored. I have to honor her. So we get there.
Thanks, Alice. And in the strategy that the Diocese of Phoenix was starting to build 25 years ago, with that 2-hour introduction to natural family planning that became a requirement, we found that this did help to make natural family planning a known thing in our diocese. It kind of helped with the branding of NFP. People started to know about it. And what we found is about 25% of those attending that introduction did go on to take a full natural family planning course. So this was a really great foundation for our diocese for the marriage prep requirement that did come to our diocese, the full requirement in 2010. And this was for a full course of natural family planning. And by that we mean 10 to 12 weeks of the course should take with charting for everyone, to be taken after a day-long Theology of the Body seminar.
In the Diocese of La Crosse, we also have a mandated NFP education. All of our engaged couples who are of childbearing years must go through a full course of natural family planning. And that course is any course that is fully approved by the USCCB. All right? We approached it a little bit differently than they did in Phoenix. So in Phoenix, they put the mandate in you said 10? 2010. And what happened with us is our NFP program, it took root in 1987. But in 2004, we did a rewrite of our marriage prep program. And it was then at that point that we as a diocesan office began talking to priests one by one by one and explaining to them the need to voluntarily mandate at their parish a full course of NFP. So we worked the back door rather than giving the mandate out the front. So that was 2004. By 2009, that we had many priests that were doing it, but it wasn't until 2016 that we were confident. We had nearly 85% of our priests, our clergy, voluntarily mandating it. That's when I went into the bishop and said, let's put the full mandate in. We're over 50%. We got them convinced. Let them convince their priestly brothers. So we put our mandate in 2017. All right, so we took a different approach.
Okay, so where are we at now? Well, why don't you tell us then the results of that you see among your priests, among your people, when you take this approach?
So another successful strategy that we found that was receptive to our clergy as well as to our couples was, again, that idea that NFP is a skill set, not a magic bullet. So that made a difference. Natural methods, we had to consider natural methods as the means by which you live out God's plan for love and life in marriage. It's how you stay faithful to that vow. By framing NFP as a skill set, to learn made it more attractive to our couples. They're like, okay, I guess I have to know how to do conflict resolution. Okay, I need to learn how to communicate and learn I statements. Okay, I guess I have to learn how to be open to life. Okay. And it was just like boom, 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 and they rolled it in much easier.
And in the Diocese of Phoenix, we were just more intentional then about forming our NFP instructors. They're not only trained to be skilled experts in their subject matter of their particular NFP method, but they're also formed and empowered in a way that highlights St. John Paul's teaching, theology of the body, so that when they're teaching couples, they can weave into their classes that language and speak to couples in personal follow-up sessions in a way that calls them, that each couple to be more expansive in their understanding of their own married sexuality. And it just couple by couple, we're able to do this in the teaching.
One other aspect that is similar to both Phoenix and to the La Crosse area is that in whatever class they're taking, a natural family planning method class that they're taking, is that we pair what we call reflection exercises with each of the classes. So most methods have like a 3-class part before we consider them fairly autonomous. But with each piece of education, we provide the couple with a theological topic that they read, discuss as a couple, and in our case, we have 3 questions they get to answer on that. And they must submit one of those 3 to the instructor who's training them. Then the instructor gets to see how are they embracing the lifestyle, the thought of God. And what that does to our instructors is that our instructors then know and are able to gauge their feedback and follow up to the couples based on where the couple is. So they know if there's resistance. They know if they're buying in. They know if they can give a gentle nudge or if they need to back up and be a little more global with them. We have a funny name for that in our instructor base. We call it the Sugar of Christ campaign. We sprinkle Jesus' sweetness wherever we go. And they really are, it's really helping because it's helping the instructor develop a relationship that accompanies the couple. And that what we're about is opening their hearts.
And so say a little bit more about the fruits then. So if you're beginning your NFP ministry with theology, how does it affect even your relationships with other offices in the diocese?
That's something that both of us are really excited about. So in your Curia offices, you have the Office for Education, the Office for Catechesis, the Office for Evangelization, the Office for ministry and social concerns, yada, yada, yada. One of the things that we found that's flourished in the Diocese of La Crosse as well as in Phoenix is that there's been an extension to other offices' collaboration using the theology of the body education. Particularly in our diocese, the offices of education, catechesis, a social ministry, youth and young adult, we all work together to provide remote and proximate education on the theology of the body before couples come in on the immediate. So we've got information, and the NFP and the Office for Marriage and Family Life thread and give these offices foundational teachings on sexuality, love, and life that helps form the families, the youth, the Catholic schools, the religious education, the young adults, and medical professionals. In our diocese, we're blessed to have 3 Catholic medical associations that the Office for Marriage and Family Life interplays. We're the conduit to that group for Bishop. So we then keep abreast with them. So we're also forming our medical people. And having this shared understanding has just really helped us flourish.
That's great. And we see the same thing happening in our diocese, where all these offices come together, and really the laity have been empowered, and they have provided this fertile soil in which to teach NFP. It's beautiful. And appreciation for our ministry has grown as well. This has come from couples, from the clergy, and from teachers of all NFP methods. We are more focused in our diocese about working together. In our diocese, and I think in La Crosse as well, method wars don't exist. They have completely ended. Not only do we accompany our couples, but we do it with collegiality between the instructors of all methods in our diocesan NFP ministry. The methods have their proper place as a good skill set, and there are standards of excellence that we require that all providers can meet, but our time is not spent in any of the wranglings between methods. Instead, our time is spent teaching together to help to heal the culture, to help it to heal in our couples.
Cindy is a master at that. I'm just going to tell you, she's par excellence. Another fruit of the new approach is generosity. Because of the expansion of God's plan for love and life into the other ministries of our diocese, the NFP ministry has become known for its generosity. What does that mean? It means that the priests, the parish staff, and individuals are frequently calling and contacting the NFP presence in our office on related matters. We now have a pretty robust parenting program and teaching fertility awareness because it's a natural offshoot of what we're doing, which leads to the last approach that Cindy's going to address, which is called evangelization.
So all of this, all of what we've learned really does add up to NFP being a means of evangelization. We found that this requirement, taught after first carefully forming couples in an adequate anthropology, it's an incredible tool for evangelization. While many of the couples come to the sacrament of marriage kind of, not necessarily that Catholic, maybe not very well formed in their faith, they start the marriage process and they get intrigued that this church, that they really just want this beautiful backdrop for their wedding. It's something their parents will pay for if they get married in the church, right? But this church is requiring them to take natural family planning. Like, what? Why would they care? And yet they're intrigued that they do care, that the church does care about their wholeness, that the integrity of their body and spirit, the integrity of them as a couple, and wants to provide them with good education about their fertility. And they're excited about what they learn in the classes, and that increases the trust for the church in general. If they're teaching us the truth about this, what else, are they teaching us the truth about? And they're excited to learn. They dip their toe in that water, and then, they see what all of those little waves are and those little ripples are. And we see, and I'm going to be very conservative in the figures that I share, that we see for over 1,000 class evaluations yearly from engaged couples, that requiring engaged couples to attend a full course of natural family planning with charting, whether they're using a contraceptive or not, provides a huge catalyst for a change of heart and behavior in these couples. Because since our bishop, Thomas Olmsted, put natural family planning as a requirement, we started asking engaged couples to complete standard anonymous evaluations a couple of times during their marriage prep process. So I'm going to share a few of those findings. They are very significant, and I will share a website with you at the end so that you can look those up if you want them for your own diocese. But the surveys that I'm going to tell you about come, first of all, we ask after a full day of Theology of the Body seminar, and we happen to use Christopher West's program, The Joy-Filled Marriage, God's Plan for Joy-Filled Marriage. And so they're taken, again, they're anonymous, and so what we have found that there is such an increase in their openness to not only natural family planning, but an openness to the church teaching. So here's an anonymous, we tallied these up, and there were over 3,000 of these surveys in the first few years that we did it. And I will say that they're actually getting better. The surveys are actually getting better because I think more and more of their friends know about this, that couples are kind of excited to go to these classes, and the openness is growing. But this was back when we first started it. Our couples are living together just like everyone else. At 63% coming in were living together, and 88% were sexually active when they come into this class. They're asked at the end of the class if they would be open to saving sex between that night that they leave until their wedding night. At that time, 42% leaving said they would. They'd be open to doing that. And they also are asked before they even take NFP if they had planned to contracept. 37% had planned to, 19% were not sure. But after the class, that goes down. Only about 14% at that point said they're still planning to contracept after going to a full day of Theology of the Body. But then after their natural family planning introduction, just the introduction, just the hour, a full 60% are saying that they are open to using natural family planning in their marriage. Here's the evangelization part. They're asked if they are interested in being more active in their faith at the end of that class. 69% said yes, they were. And 79% said that they were interested in a deeper commitment to Christ. So you can see this really is good news for these couples. Now, we also have another time that we ask them questions, and this is after their natural family planning course has begun. So we require 4 full classes. So they have an introduction kind of in the God's Plan for Joy-Filled Marriage, just an introduction. Then they choose a method, can be any method that has a full course series. And after the 3rd of those, so they've been charting now for 6, 7, 8 weeks, we ask another series of questions, pretty much the same thing. And at that point, a full 70% said they are sure that they are going to use natural family planning in their marriage. Others are still undecided, about 19%. About 5% said they're glad for the information, but they're just open to whatever happens. And only 6% say that they will continue or start to use contraceptives. So giving them the truth and letting them see their own charting is a huge, huge catalyst for change. And we also have some comments that the numbers are wonderful, but I love reading the comments because we always have a place for them to write in some of their comments. And I just wanted to read some of those comments to you. Sure. So what are they saying? Here's one. This is a very interesting and useful course that I believe should be taught in place of sex ed in school. It is far more useful and brings one in touch with their own body as well as their partners. Here's another. We were not sure about using NFP until we went to God's Plan for Joy-Filled Marriage class, which cemented the idea and gave us a lot more information. Another. While we're still learning, looking back, we see how far we've come. It will be great to continue to use NFP in our marriage. I hope you'll be around for a while. I think we still need a lot of feedback. Great course. Learned a ton. Looking forward to getting better at our charting techniques. Going to stop using contraceptives and start NFP as our main form of birth control. Here's another. Right now I'm on the pill for medical reasons, but will stop after I finish this last cycle. After that, we will do NFP. I should be having normal cycles in about 6 months, and so I would appreciate a follow-up. Thank you again for your help. I was amazed to see how the chart progressed along with my cycle. Excited to use. Here's one we hear. And this one is a complaint, and this is what we hear over and over and over. I went to Catholic schools for 12 years and never heard about this before. It would have saved me a lot of heartache.
All of those comments came to you from the Diocese of Phoenix, and I could add another 10 that are of the similar nature, so we decided not to bore you. Just say, in the rural area where there are a lot of cows, the same information is happening, okay?
And we'll stop this part of the presentation, and I'll just sum up a little bit, and then we'll have a discussion, hopefully, and answer your questions. But you should know that in the examples of the dioceses of Phoenix and La Crosse, these dioceses are unique in the United States. They're among an elite few, I have to say, that since 1968 has always had the support of the bishop behind this ministry. They have also had the unique gift of committed NFP experts, laymen and women, and even some religious in their dioceses who have helped to build this ministry. And that's one of the things that we have learned nationally in the country, that when the local bishop supports NFP, it will be strong. And we have also learned that when NFP experts come forward and commit to the local diocesan NFP ministry, and they have the vision to build a structure, that is also part of the diocese's comprehensive ministry to married couples, NFP will be strong. So this is a both-and reality. You need the bishop and you need the NFP experts. And interestingly and understandably, as you can imagine, other dioceses are not like that. Other dioceses have had inconsistent support, both from the side of the bishop as well as, you could have a bishop who wants to do something and people who are not willing to come forward to help. And we have had that problem as well. So we do have a lot of variety in the dioceses at this point in time. And if you go onto our website, the Bishops' Conference website, www.usccb.org, and go to the Natural Family Planning section, we have an annual survey that we do every year where we take a look at what's going on in the dioceses. And again, you can see from that the weaknesses besides the strengths. To say one of the strengths that is actually not noticed in the surveys, well, it would be there, but if you haven't been part of this community for many years, you wouldn't know how significant it is. And I can tell you in the 1980s, most of the coordinators were volunteers. They were usually a young mother with young children working out of her home. And when she would have to go to the diocese to push things forward, she would have to finagle, basically, with a diocesan chancery person to send her materials out to the pastors and the parishes. Often there was a terrible amount of opposition from middle management diocesan staff. And many times I would have to spend in consultation with these coordinators talking about how could we win that person over so that person becomes a supporter and not an obstacle. And now today, we don't have that problem anymore. NFP ministry is firmly in the offices of marriage and family life. It's within the ministry in the diocese, in the structure. But the problems now are, as I said, sometimes the directors most time has way too many ministries that they're coordinating, and how much can you do when you're one person? Excuse me. And that's where you need the NFP volunteers to come forward to help in the work. In addition, we also have inconsistencies with budgeting. Most of our, in the 2016 survey we did, 68% of the dioceses who responded, and we always have about half of the dioceses who respond to the survey, they were operating their programs on less than $10,000 per year. Well, I have to say that's pitiful. We know in the United States of America, you need more money than that to run a program. In addition to marriage preparation, there was great variety. Again, in 2016, we had 17% of our respondents saying that they only allowed 16 to 30 minutes of NFP education in marriage prep, while 21% said that they had 46 minutes to an hour, and 35% said 1 hour to 2 hours of NFP education. There is a new trend that has been happening in our surveys. Currently, we have 12 dioceses that require NFP education in marriage preparation, a full course, not just an introduction. We have many who require an introduction, but we only have 12 who require the full course. We have over 22 right now who are looking at implementing a full course. The Bishops' Conference itself does not have a position on that. In my office, when I consult with a coordinator, I tend to encourage them to explore that possibility, because my personal philosophy is we know that the tidal wave is hammering at us, right? We're up against a Goliath. And so what can we do that is humanly possible as our part to share in this good work? It's really the work of the Lord God to get his truth out to his people. And I think that requiring natural family planning in Diocesan NFP marriage ministry as an educational gift is a good thing. I don't see a downside to it. And we have dioceses like Phoenix and La Crosse that have already done it. And you can consult with your peers to find out how they did it. When a bishop finds out if something works and if something is going well, he usually gets pretty inspired. So it's important to do a little research. In any case, that's a long story to say that we have a lot of work left to do. We also have a national diocesan NFP advisory committee. Alice and Cindy are part of that. Dr. Karen Plahelos is also one of our members of our board. I don't know if Janet McLaughlin is here. Is she? I don't know. We have another board member here. In any case, we have a process of national standards that we also try to encourage the dioceses to implement. And we have these good people who can help consult with the coordinators to go through that process and therefore strengthen and develop their programs. But why don't we open up the floor to questions now, too, if you want to discuss specific issues. We have at least 7 minutes, according to my wristwatch.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate all this information. It's so great for us. And I wanted to let Alice know you're in good company, because dairy farmers are great at using NFP for dairy cattle. So I think it comes...
You must have the same questions. When we have farmers come in, they go, she's just like my herd. And it's like, don't tell her that. So anyway, go ahead.
Good. Two questions from me. It takes a lot of work of volunteers to put this together. Can you give us some suggestions on how you recruit volunteers in the parishes and throughout the diocese to run all these classes?
One of the things that we do, Deacon, in Wisconsin is, first of all, we don't turn anyone away that wants to assist in the ministry. That's number one. Number two, beyond me still wearing the hat as the NFP coordinator, we've hired 2 people in our office. One is what we call our NFP scheduler, and that's the person that schedules all the classes, and makes sure that all the nuts and bolts are together when classes are happening. We have turned most of our classes to online in Wisconsin because we're rural. We're 19 counties. We cover about 1/5 of the state of Wisconsin. And to require, our millennials want online presence. But our online presence is not just, here's the education, go do it. we have instructors who then are personalized guidance with them when they go through the class. That made a huge difference for us because now anybody that wants a class, they can start at any time, 24/7, etc. The third thing that we have is we have a special skill set, a woman who is cross-trained in methods. We call her the NFP advocate. And when things get sticky in any method, she's the one that has the a specific skill set that she can assist couples in difficult situations. All right. And then beyond that, we have our marriage prep trained people who present the openness to life, which is the 2-hour, if you will, intro.
Okay.
And we do that. So.
Okay. And the second question I had is you touched on a little bit on the cohabiting. I mean, how do you deal with that, and how is that received with the great percentage of couples that cohabitate?
We are pretty amazed at the invitation to move apart that they receive at the end of the God's Plan for Joy-Filled Marriage. You know, the couples are you know, they sign a pledge and they try to move out, or they move in with a friend or whatever, and they get into their NFP classes kind of all excited, and something's brand new in their life. And our NFP teachers are like thrilled to pieces because they're not teaching resistant couples because they've had this theology of the body first. So that's where that invitation to move apart is given. But it is an invitation. We don't impose, we propose.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Let me add to that, too. Some dioceses have also used parish priests who they'll talk to take a look in the parish to see which couples have really good marriages, a good lively faith, and the parish priest will invite a couple to consider becoming a natural family planning teacher or a promoter. And whether or not that priest knows if the couple is really with the church completely on the issue, he's going to find out. It's going to challenge them. Often we have had that kind of regrouping and reconversion to the teachings, and then that couple has become an advocate as well, either as a teacher or as a promoter. That's also kind of that sort of missionary strategy. Next person.
Well, this is a very simple question, and you mentioned something about a budget. So if I understood you correctly, you were saying that a coordinator for the NFP or this program should be a paid position, and then you said something about a budget for the actual program that has to do with marriage ministry. Can you give us an idea of what the USCCB thinks is realistic?
Well, you know, we haven't done an analysis, but I can tell you from looking at what people tell us that even if you have a part-time person's got to make a salary which would be compatible to their region of the country. Mm-hmm. In Washington, D.C., part-time, you really ought to be making minimally $30,000. Mm-hmm. And that's a huge amount of money in another part of the country. Mm-hmm. So everybody has to know what people need to live in their own regions for just a baseline salary. Okay. And then you have to look at, well, right, are we paying our teachers or not? Most people don't because it is a volunteer ministry. But again, to thank your teachers, you have to find ways to thank them. It may not be monetary. It could be giving them a community. They've got quarterly meetings. They've got retreats you're doing for them. They've got retreats and appreciation. Yeah, and any type of appreciation, things like that. Creating that sense of we're in this together as a team, and even getting the bishop to come and to spend time with those teachers. So if you can't do it with money, you have to find a way to thank and to feed spiritually and emotionally, even intellectually, your teachers. You may want to bring in speakers to do in services with them and that kind of thing. And then, of course, there are this is such a complex question. You know, you would think budget would be easy to talk about, but then the individual NFP providers have their own requirements for what they have to pay for materials, or in the case of an organization like, for example, Couple to Couple League, you have to pay a certain amount of money that goes back to Couple League. I know Northwest Family Services works out a payment schedule with a diocese so that they'll get a certain percentage so that their organization can keep going and growing, and the diocese will get a certain amount of money. I would just say, ballparking it in my mind, I'm thinking $50,000 will get you going.
Okay.
And that's just based on that kind of thing.
And is the 50,000 including the 30,000?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, and remember, you also get clients who will have to pay something for the course, which they should.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's the United States.
I had two questions. One, logistically, when you said, like, at the marriage thing, you have, like, the talk about the methods. Do you have one person talk about the different methods that are available, or do you have each method represented in different speakers?
So, when you present the theology of marriage and the adequate anthropology, that is typically void of the method. So you can talk in generalities that there are fertility signs that a woman can, that she can observe. So you do it that way. So we are great at being generalists on that. So in our diocese, we do not present method-specific information. We don't. But then on our website, I'm going to turn this computer on at the end. Anybody that wants to see websites, you can come up and copy them off. Then they are directed to where the method-specific information is.
Okay.
Same?
Yeah, that's the same. So we have an hour, a couple usually gives it at the end of the day. They are a teaching method they are teachers. But the presentation it doesn't talk about the type of method or the method. It kind of talks about the types of methods and really gives that underpinning, the scientific underpinning of why NFP works. Okay. And then they go to their methods.
And in other dioceses that have done the introduction overview, they'll get the general science and methodology in that sort of generic way, but then they'll have a brief little introduction of the different methods available in their diocese, as well as distance learning. And then often, if they schedule properly, they have actual workshops that are introductions to Billings or Couple League or Creighton Model. It depends on which teachers are in the diocese. So it can be organized differently.
And then as far as paying, do the diocese pay, or you had mentioned about clients, paying for?
Well,
services. I wondered
again,
how that works.
As I said, when you've got a budget structure and you've got a diocesan program and the coordinator knows who the teachers are, who the providers are, something is always worked out as to what does the actual client pay to the teacher and what goes to the diocese, or what, if necessary, goes to the provider organization, or even a percentage to the teacher. It's very different, and it really does depend on these relationships and agreements that coordinators have established. We're over time, everyone. So can we take one more? What do you think?
People need to leave.
Oh, you have to leave to go. All right. Well, we'll be here if you want to talk more. Thank you.